Well, Nintendo somehow managed to make a messy situation even worse. When I uploaded my last video, which I'm going to put the link in the description below, I gave my thoughts on it and some alternative options and that sort of thing that you can check out, which I do suggest, and how it could potentially affect the industry in general. And honestly speaking, I thought not because of me, because I'm a small time YouTuber, but because so many comments and stuff that are happening, all over the internet about this whole situation, there's gonna be some positive response from Nintendo. Or in fact, I actually hoped that they would do this because, contrary to what some may think, I actually want them to do better because I want to possibly get the Switch 2, or that's what I was hoping to do. And to give you a bit of a context, Nintendo has always been a special part of my heart. NES was one of my first consoles that I've ever owned. And even when Sega was at their absolute peak and they were just bringing some amazing games, I always stuck with my Nintendo consoles until I became a PC player and then Xbox. So it gives me no pleasure to see them struggle or fail. I actually want them to do good. And Nintendo, over the years, especially in the last 20 years, have established themselves as a family console from the Wii days. So the fact that we're not the most powerful console out there, but we are family friendly. So maybe not just get one, get two for your kids and let them play. And they've just completely gone against our whole philosophy with this new console. Because Switch was such a huge success, it's letting it get into their head basically. It's ridiculous. And to give you a best example of how badly this could affect Nintendo, before anybody think this is in any shape or form me hoping that that they do badly or clickbait or whatever, let me give you a bit of an example or context. In middle 2000s, Xbox came in to compete with PlayStation. And although their original Xbox was just this incredible powerhouse with some amazing games, they really kind of struggled to establish themselves against PlayStation 2. And then they came up with the idea of Xbox 360. And although that console had so many issues, you could say the same about Switch 1 with the drifting and all that, it's still, because of its value, because of its price, because of its options and that sort of thing that it gave to the players, it became a household name and they became this absolute behemoth going into Xbox One. And with their arrogance, they decided to do something and they basically kamikaze themselves to a point where to this date, they have not been able to establish the same position that they managed to get back then, even though they have had Game Pass and all that. So for all the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo fanboys out there that are just going crazy, no, this is not going to benefit you at all if less people are getting this console, because Nintendo needs players, needs numbers because they are a profit-driven company. That's how their business model is. So to give you that example of what happened, let me just play you a video to give you an even bit more context of what happened in 2013. So this was basically the CEO of Xbox back in 2013. So here we go.
It's a great line for games.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think people are going to love it, and then they're going to understand what we're trying to create and how it links games and entertainment, the functionality of the box, some of the advantages that you get of having a box that is designed to use an online state. So that, to me, is a future-proof choice, and I think people could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message. If you don't,
Well,
if you don't like it,
if you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously, when I read the blogs and thought about who's really the most impacted. There was a person who said, "Hey, I'm on a nuclear sub,
Right.
and I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine that it's not easy to get an internet connection."
Well, as ignorant as possible, to say the least. And to give you a bit of a context for all the people that don't remember those days, back then the internet was not that fast for a lot of people. Now we have improved, seen improvement across the board for a lot of places and that sort of thing. A lot of people did tradings all the time. A lot of people like physical games and that sort of thing, including myself, and they had collections and that sort of thing. So this just came out of nowhere without, any context of what is happening and that sort of thing. And it was also the most expensive console out there. And it ended up being a colossal failure that they had to take out the Connect and they had to reverse back. And it was just a complete mess for Xbox. So I'm going to give you a sense of deja vu. And now we're in 2025. And now let's see what the CEO of Nintendo America have just said. So look, this is from CBS News. So this is not from Reddit or anything like that. This is him talking to a reporter. And let me give you the deja vu. Let me highlight this part. So we recognize there are some people that may not be able to afford Switch 2 price point. That's why we wanted to make other Switch platforms available. So people still have an opportunity to come into our gaming universe, be a part of these characters in these worlds, and see value, if you will, in whatever rung of platform they come in. Deja vu? It's just so insanely ignorant to what's going on. People's wages haven't gone up. People are losing their jobs. People are struggling. And okay, I get it. The cost is going up. You need to increase the cost of the console. But why do you need to charge for like almost everything? Like literally everything. And even if you look at, for example, the chat option, the chat thing is on the console itself. So it's not even on the controller anymore. So you may have to buy an accessory for that. You may have to buy an accessory for all those sort of things. So if you want to play 4K games, you have to buy the dock. So so you can't really get 1080p on Cyberpunk, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like running on that sort of a hardware. It's just gonna run like, well, trash, to be perfectly honest with you. And I know there are videos out there that are just yada yada, they've tested and so on, but this is a controlled environment. So the point of it is, as you kind of, for a family, if you got like 2 kids, you can't just buy one, you have to buy 2. By the time you start adding up the figures and everything, you are talking about crazy numbers over a year or 2 and so on. And yes, I get it, the whole general parental responsibility and all that we're talking about, that, the parents have a sense that they have to kind of respond properly and whatever. I get that. I completely, understand the point and that sort of thing that some people make about these sort of circumstances. But the point is, there's got to be a level of understanding. And this is just a sense of deja vu. It just seems they've learned nothing. And in fact, let me just give you another example, actually. I was going to do that middle of that conversation, but then I thought, let's just finish that. But so this is now talking to Washington Post. And again, for all the Nintendo fans out there, the issue is not just the fact that the game prices have gone up, and people are making argument that the card, everything's cost of everything has gone up, so they should be charging more, which is fine, except with Nintendo stuff, you got to buy cartridges. You can't get codes, you can't buy anything that you can, for a family and so on, that you can buy things cheaper. And if you need digital keys and so on, there's going to be potential issues in terms of trade-ins and that sort of thing. But where the problem is coming from is not just the price. This is him again talking. This is not me just picking up from random places. What you see right there is a variable pricing. So what variable means? It means that, as I covered in my last video, they can charge whatever they want for the games, and not just Nintendo, all the publishers. So you can't possibly see games being $100 or like £90 or whatever. That's insane. That is literally insane for games. Because you got to remember, some of those games are still going to have microtransactions in them from the likes of EA and that sort of thing. So just imagine how insane that is for a family to be able to afford. So I honestly want anybody to see a justification with that, because there isn't. And also, for all the keyboard warriors out there talking about Nintendo and that sort of thing, this is a 1080p screen with hardware that are not that powerful at all. And here's another key element, with all the backwards compatible games and that sort of thing, the argument that people are making, well, they're developing and yada yada. No. So let me give you a bit of a technical aspect. With a lot of backwards compatibility games, what happens in most of the times is there is a piece of hardware that's in your console that costs money to basically run the old games on your console in line with the current hardware and that sort of thing that you've got, right? So that cost Nintendo or PlayStation or whatever, if they do go that way, money. Well, Nintendo always did it before. So you could make a justification, well, they essentially have to do the hardware double. But here's the kicker, guys. Let me show you another article. So this is once again, from Nintendo's website. So this is not from me. This is not from me just talking about it or blurting it out or whatever, and Reddit or anything like that. This is literally the developers of Nintendo. So they are literally talking about the hardwares of Nintendo and that sort of thing. So it's talking about, like, through this conversation and that sort of thing, they're talking about all the stuff that are happening and that sort of thing. So it says, I'm sure those who own Nintendo will be delighted that can play Nintendo Switch 2. Did you already decide on this functionality? So right from the beginning, we wanted the new system to be able to play Switch games. But back then, we were told there will be technical challenges. When we first started Switch 2 development, the focus was enhancing its performance as a hardware, namely expanding its capacity, so compatibility was a lower priority. For example, Nintendo DS games were playable on Nintendo 3DS, and Wii games were playable on Wii U. But it was difficult to achieve the same level of compatibility with Switch 2 because the hardware design approach was different from those systems. It's tricky to explain. Maybe the easiest way to understand is that the method used to achieve the compatibility between Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS and between Switch and Switch 2 are completely different. Simply put, those systems are compatible because Nintendo 3DS contained Nintendo DS hardware and Wii U contained Wii hardware. However, Switch 2 doesn't contain any Switch hardware. So then he continues on, says, basically, if you try to use technology like emulator software, we'll have to run Switch 2 at the full capacity, but maybe battery wouldn't last on. So we did something that's somewhere in between software emulator and hardware compatibility. So give you a bit of an understanding, what they essentially are saying is they're not putting a hardware that's costing them money. So they are literally porting the games from Nintendo Switch. And essentially, this is sort of emulating using a hardware and software in combination. So essentially, it's an emulator. And what the emulator does, it basically makes sure that the whole software runs better. As I've given you an example, I don't have it here with me. I'm looking for that that device that I showed you on the last video. But you can buy emulating devices all the time, right? And the cost of emulator is not a lot, especially for a big company like Nintendo. So when they're talking about this improved frame rates and improved performance, oh, it's literally the game running on a bigger hardware, and they essentially are using save as and that sort of thing. So they are literally charging people money for something that is barely costing them anything at all. So there is barely any justification for $10-20 charge for playing your old games. This is just them making money out of people. So I can't see how anybody can justify this in any way, shape, or form. Any way, shape, or form. Honestly, I don't think I will be doing any more of these videos unless something just insane happens with Nintendo. But I just cannot imagine them doing something even worse than what they've already done. Well, to be fair, nothing surprises me these days. But as I said in my last video, guys, this could set such an absolutely hugely negative thing, a wave, shall we say, through the whole industry that could affect everything. It could kill new consoles. They're going to be insanely priced, even worse than what PlayStation, 5 Pro was and that sort of thing. And we just going to be really, really struggling. And for many people, gaming is a getaway. Many people is the only entertainment that they've got. We could lose this. And I'm not being over dramatic, because if everybody were making more money, honestly, I wish the world was like that. No problem. We'd be absolutely fine to contribute to improve the industry. But the industry has to also understand the struggles of the people that are actually buying their consoles. And as I said, if they want to increase the cost of the console itself, then at least make the other cost reasonable. Don't just go and penny pinch from every corner that you can. Again, I don't know if they're going to listen to all these backlash and that sort of thing. And I genuinely, for all the Nintendo lovers out there, I hope they do. Because if they go down the route of Microsoft, as I showed you that video, even after 12 years, Microsoft haven't been able to recover from what they did back then. So this is not a good thing for Nintendo. And once Nintendo loses that spot as a family console, they are going to be in a big trouble, because they're never the most powerful options out there. And it could end up damaging the whole company. Like, remember what happened to Sega, guys. They were the powerhouse of 90s, and they just went away through just some sheer bad decisions. So for all your Nintendo lovers out there, this is not a good thing. This needs to be addressed. This needs to be considered, and hopefully smarter heads will prevail. Anyways, my rant is done. Hopefully this gives you a bit of a context of what I've talked about and that sort of thing. And if it has, please do smash that like button. Again, I'm going to be uploading more videos on anime, gaming, tech, and that sort of thing like this, and also gaming in general on my channel. So please do support my channel and do subscribe. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching, and hope wherever you are doing good, and peace.